This story explores how the Airlords Confraternity, Eiye, rose to dominate the University of Ibadan and the streets of Ibadan city. It examines their structure, influence, and rivalry with the Black Axe Confraternity, revealing how strategy, hierarchy, and deep social connections helped them maintain power across campuses and Yoruba states. The story highlights the dangers of cultism and emphasizes that there is no gain in joining such groups.
The University of Ibadan has always been known for academic excellence, activism, and vibrant student life. But beneath that energy lies another side of campus history, the long and complicated story of confraternities. Among them, the Airlords Confraternity, also known as the Eiye Confraternity, became one of the most recognized and influential groups within the university and beyond. The Airlords' roots trace back to a movement that began decades earlier in Nigerian universities. Originally, confraternities were social clubs created for unity, pride, and brotherhood. They were meant to promote academic support and social awareness among students. Over time, however, some of these groups transformed into rival organizations competing for control, influence, and respect. The Eiye Confraternity was one of the groups that grew powerful and deeply connected within the student environment. At the University of Ibadan, the Airlords became known not just as a confraternity, but as a symbol of presence. Their members were intelligent, organized, and strategic. They managed to combine academic excellence with influence, giving them a unique kind of authority that attracted attention. It was not just about numbers, it was about structure, planning, and relationships. The Airlords developed strong links within Ibadan city, far beyond the university gates. Over the years, they gained control of certain areas and neighborhoods where their presence became visible in subtle ways. They were connected with street networks, making them more than a campus-based group. Their influence spread across both educated and uneducated circles, from university students to local youth in the city. The strength of the Airlords came from their ability to connect the street with the school. Many confraternities focused only on student recruitment, but the Airlords built a system that blended both worlds. This connection made them more stable, giving them protection and visibility that other confraternities could not easily match. It also made them difficult to challenge. Inside the University of Ibadan, the Airlords gradually grew into the most recognized confraternity. They were not just the most feared, they were the most respected. Their dominance was not only because of violence or rivalry, but also because of how well they understood organization and influence. They controlled certain student environments, had strong alliances, and maintained discipline among their ranks. However, this dominance also came with tension. Other confraternities, especially the Black Axe, viewed the Airlords' control with resentment. The two groups rarely aligned. They stood for different systems of power and influence, and this created an invisible divide within campus life that continued to shape the environment for years.
As the Airlords continued to grow in strength at the University of Ibadan, another confraternity, the Black Axe, also sought to maintain its presence. The Black Axe was not a small group. Across Nigeria, it had a strong reputation, wide connections, and influence in several universities. But within the University of Ibadan, it found itself in a tough position. The Airlords had already established themselves as the most dominant confraternity, and they were not willing to lose control. The rivalry between the two groups became one of the most defining features of student life. It was not always visible, but it existed in power struggles, silent competition, and occasional clashes. The Airlords saw themselves as the rightful leaders of the campus, while the Black Axe viewed them as rivals, standing in the way of broader expansion. This rivalry was not based only on strength. It was built on pride, influence, and ideology. The Airlords believed in visibility and connection. They focused on controlling the spaces that mattered, the hostels, the lecture halls, and even off-campus areas where students lived. They made their presence known through organization and structure. In contrast, the Black Axe worked more quietly, building links through political influence and relationships with people outside the school. This difference in approach shaped how each group was seen. The Airlords were the face of campus confraternity culture in Ibadan, while the Black Axe were more of an underground force that moved carefully but effectively. However, the Airlords' numbers and local support gave them the upper hand. The rivalry didn't only exist within the campus, it also extended into the streets of Ibadan. The Airlords had deep roots in the city, and many of their street allies were young men who admired their presence and wanted to be associated with their strength. The Black Axe, on the other hand, had influence in other universities across Nigeria and beyond. But in Ibadan city itself, the Airlords were clearly ahead. Their dominance became more visible when students or outsiders discussed campus power. It was almost impossible to talk about university confraternities in Ibadan without mentioning the Airlords. They had reached a point where even those who were not part of any group knew their influence was unmatched. The Black Axe might have had the national presence, but within the boundaries of the University of Ibadan, the Airlords set the pace. This rivalry created tension, but also reinforced the Airlords' dominance. The more other confraternities tried to challenge them, the stronger their internal unity became. Their connection with local youth and the backing they seemed to have from respected individuals in society kept them ahead. By this period, the University of Ibadan had become the center of their influence in Western Nigeria, a symbol of how the Airlords' structure could thrive both within and beyond academic environments.
After the Airlords firmly established themselves as the leading confraternity within the University of Ibadan, their influence began to grow beyond the campus. What started as a university-based organization slowly expanded into a wider network that reached many corners of Ibadan city and even spread to other institutions in the western part of Nigeria. The Airlords understood that dominance on campus alone was not enough. To maintain their strength, they needed to extend their control into the environment surrounding the university. This meant connecting with local communities, street groups, and individuals who looked up to them. Over time, their name became familiar in several areas across Ibadan. The Airlords' ability to blend the academic world with the streets gave them a different level of power. They didn't operate as a group isolated within the university, they became part of the city's social system. This connection gave them safety, information, and reach. When new students arrived at the University of Ibadan, they entered a city already shaped by the Airlords' presence. Meanwhile, other confraternities like the Black Axe tried to keep up. The Airlords' foundation there was too deep, too structured, and too connected to be easily challenged. Their members had created strong links with street figures who respected their organization and discipline. The expansion didn't stop at Ibadan city. Reports and studies indicated that the Airlords' influence began to spread into polytechnics, colleges of education, and other universities within Yoruba states, such as Ekiti, Osun, and Ondo. This regional presence made them one of the most dominant confraternities in southwestern Nigeria. While other groups had local dominance elsewhere, the Airlords' network in the West became a standard others tried to match. Their control was not only through numbers, but also through reputation. In some areas, people spoke about them with a mix of respect and fear. They were known to be well-organized and disciplined, qualities that set them apart from less structured groups. This reputation attracted new members who saw them as a symbol of strength and unity. Within Ibadan, their name became part of street life. Local boys who were not in school admired the confraternity and sought association, while students viewed them as a major force in campus affairs. The Airlords' symbol and identity carried weight in both academic and non-academic circles. By this time, their dominance was not just about control, it had become a legacy. The University of Ibadan stood as the core of that power, and the city itself served as their extended ground. Other confraternities,
including the Black Axe, remained active, but none could match the level of connection and influence that the Airlords had built within the heart of Ibadan.
The Airlords' dominance at the University of Ibadan and across the city did not come without pressure. As their presence grew, so did the attention they attracted from rival confraternities, school authorities, and even law enforcement agencies. Yet, what kept the Airlords at the top was their ability to adapt, organize, and remain united even in the face of strong opposition. One of their major challenges came from the Black Axe Confraternity, which refused to be overshadowed. The rivalry between the two groups had deep historical roots, fueled by pride and competition for influence. Whenever one side gained new ground, the other tried to reclaim relevance. On campus, these rivalries sometimes led to silent tensions, and at times, open confrontations that drew attention from the university management. However, while other groups relied on intimidation, the Airlords built a system based on loyalty and hierarchy. Their members were taught discipline and secrecy. Every member understood their rank and responsibility, which reduced internal conflict. This structure gave them stability, a key reason they could withstand external pressure. Off campus, the Airlords had connections that acted as shields. Some lecturers, traditional rulers, and influential people within Ibadan had sympathies or old ties with the group. These figures were not directly involved in violent acts, but their influence helped to reduce the level of exposure or punishment that members might face. It became a protective network that made the Airlords harder to suppress. Meanwhile, the Black Axe Confraternity tried to rebuild its strength. They had members who were equally intelligent and well-connected. Their strategy often involved trying to recruit bright students from influential backgrounds to match the Airlords' reach. Yet, on the University of Ibadan campus, the Airlords maintained a symbolic hold through reputation, unity, and the legacy of senior members who continued to support the younger generation. Even the authorities found it difficult to fully dismantle their operations. Whenever arrests or investigations happened, new faces would rise quietly to keep the system running. The confraternity had evolved over time into a flexible structure that didn't rely too heavily on individuals. Their survival depended on collective understanding and shared loyalty rather than a single leader. Their members were also careful about visibility. They avoided unnecessary public displays that could attract attention. Meetings were planned discreetly, communications were coded, and activities were layered to ensure no outsider could easily trace their internal workings. This level of organization made them look more like a network than a group of students. Through years of observation, researchers noted that the Airlords' continued dominance stemmed from two major strengths: organization and connection. They were not the loudest, but they were the most structured. They didn't always react immediately to challenges, but when they did, their response was strategic. By the early 2000s, the University of Ibadan became a symbol of their endurance. Despite efforts from rival confraternities and authorities, the Airlords continued to remain relevant, balancing academic life, social influence, and underground operations with a precision that kept them at the top of the confraternity hierarchy in Ibadan.
The Airlords Confraternity's presence at the University of Ibadan did not end at the school gates. Over time, their influence grew beyond the campus and spread into different parts of Ibadan city. They became part of the social, political, and economic life of the area. It was not just about being feared anymore. It was about being recognized as powerful and connected. Many former members who had graduated from the university began to take up important positions in society. Some became business owners, lecturers, political aides, and even government workers. Because they shared a strong bond with the younger members still in school, this created a cycle of support. When new students were recruited, they already had people in higher places to protect and guide them. This outside support helped the Airlords maintain control on campus. If there were problems with authorities, someone outside the school could intervene quietly. If a member needed a job or help after graduation, there were people ready to assist. That long chain of connection made the confraternity more than just a campus group.
It became a large, hidden network that stretched across the entire city. At the same time, the Black Axe Confraternity was not standing still. They also had members in important places, but the Airlords' dominance in Ibadan gave them a clear advantage. In student politics, especially within the students' union government, the Airlords often had more influence. They used that platform to protect their members and to maintain respect among the student body. The Airlords' influence also extended to the streets of Ibadan. In places like Mokola, Dogbe, and Orita Mefa, it was common for street boys and touts to show loyalty to the Airlords. These were not students, but uneducated young men who saw the confraternity as a way to gain power and recognition. The Airlords, aware of their importance, sometimes used these street networks for communication, protection, and other operations. Still, the group knew that too much attention could bring danger. They preferred to operate quietly, without open violence or public confrontation. Their leadership structure encouraged discipline and caution. Members were reminded that strength did not always mean fighting. It meant strategy and patience. Meanwhile, in Ibadan politics, rumors often circulated about top politicians having old links to the Airlords. While there was little public evidence, the influence of the confraternity could be felt in how easily some individuals moved within power circles. The organization had grown from being a student group to something with roots in local power dynamics. The balance between the Airlords and the Black Axe remained tense. Though both had influence, the Airlords' ability to connect academics, streets, and politics made them stronger within Ibadan. They didn't just dominate through fear, they dominated through structure and unity. By the mid-2010s, the University of Ibadan had become known not only as one of Nigeria's top institutions, but also as the spiritual stronghold of the Airlords Confraternity in the Western region. Their name carried weight, their connections ran deep, and their dominance continued.
As time kept it moving, the Airlords Confraternity became more than just a feared name on the University of Ibadan campus. They became part of the system itself. The leadership of the Airlords grew wiser. They stopped unnecessary fights and focused on building structures that could last. They had members among student leaders, class representatives, and even some who worked in campus maintenance. These positions gave them quiet control over information and movement. When something was happening on campus, they usually knew before anyone else. By this time, many lecturers had also learned to respect or fear them. Some lecturers had old connections to the group from their own university days. That made the Airlords even stronger because it created a bridge between the students and the older generation. When disciplinary issues came up, someone somewhere could make a phone call and calm things down. The Black Axe Confraternity, however, did not give up. They still had strongholds in other schools across Imo, Benin, and some parts of Lagos. But in Ibadan, the Airlords' control was too tight. The campus atmosphere had changed. Most new students already knew who ruled the environment. Even those who had no interest in any confraternity knew the boundaries. They knew which hostel blocks were off limits, and they understood the street codes that existed in and around the University of Ibadan. While the Airlords maintained order on campus, their influence extended far beyond it. In the city of Ibadan, they also controlled certain streets known for nightlife, transportation, and local trade. Street boys, bike riders, and small business owners often had connections with the group, even if they were not formal members. This connection helped them gather information and protect their network from outside threats. The authorities noticed these developments. Campus security, state police, and even university administrators tried several times to break the circle, but their efforts rarely produced results. The Airlords had people who could anticipate every move. The confraternity's foundation was too strong and too connected to fall apart easily. By now, the Airlords had transformed their image. To some, they were a criminal group. To others, they were a symbol of brotherhood and power. But behind those mixed opinions was a simple truth. They controlled their space completely. Their system was built on secrecy, loyalty, and discipline. While the Black Axe still had a presence, they were no longer the main voice. The Airlords' silence was their strength. They didn't need to announce their dominance anymore. It was already written in the way people acted, moved, and even whispered their name. On campus and across the streets of Ibadan, their control had become part of the daily rhythm of life.
The Airlords Confraternity had built more than just a presence at the University of Ibadan. They had established a full network that stretched across many parts of Western Nigeria. What began as a campus group slowly transformed into a regional structure that combined university intelligence with street-level connections. In Ibadan, their power was already known. Every student, trader, and street boy understood that the Airlords had influence that extended beyond lectures and exams. The group's activities reached the motor parks, bars, and corners where everyday life in Ibadan took place. While the university remained their main base, the city itself became a field of quiet control. Meanwhile, on campus, the Airlords maintained their balance carefully. They didn't just rely on numbers, they relied on coordination. Every member had a role to play. The Black Axe Confraternity tried to regain influence by recruiting fresh students. They focused more on numbers, while the Airlords focused on strength and secrecy. It was a silent competition. In Ibadan, the Airlords' mark was everywhere. Their presence also shaped how other confraternities operated. Smaller groups avoided conflicts on the University of Ibadan campus because they knew the Airlords had deep connections both inside and outside the school. Even street boys in places like Mokola, Sango, and Bodija identified with them. That street respect made it difficult for rivals to find new ground in the city. The government and university management occasionally tried to clamp down on cult-related activities, but those efforts often ended with few results. The Airlords were organized and knew how to blend in. They had built a system of protection through their influence among respected figures, lecturers, community elders, and even individuals in local government positions. By this stage, their presence in Ibadan and surrounding states was not just about dominance, it was about legacy. The Airlords had created a structure that connected the classroom, the streets, and the political space. Their strength was not in how loud they were, but in how deeply they had blended into society.
In the University of Ibadan and across Western Nigeria, they survived because they understood how to manage power quietly. The leaders knew that open confrontation brought attention, and attention brought danger. So they built a culture based on structure, patience, and respect for order. Every member was expected to follow the code of silence. The confraternity's rules were not written anywhere, yet everyone understood them. Loyalty came first, and talking loosely was never tolerated. New members were guided by older ones who taught them that the survival of the group depended on secrecy and unity. Anyone who disobeyed or acted carelessly faced internal discipline, which could range from warnings to complete isolation. On the University of Ibadan campus, the Airlords maintained a system that kept them organized. They had different levels of leadership, each responsible for specific areas. This structure ensured that the group functioned smoothly, even when individuals graduated or left the school. The Black Axe Confraternity, their main rival, often struggled to maintain the same kind of order. While the Black Axe had numbers and resources, internal fights and suspicion sometimes weakened them. The Airlords used this to their advantage. They focused on consistency rather than speed. Their leaders preferred long-term control to quick victories. The Airlords' discipline also earned them respect among those outside the confraternity world. In Ibadan streets, the Airlords' image continued to grow. They became known not only for their influence, but also for their ability to maintain peace among their own members. Street boys who looked up to them admired their coordination. Many tried to copy their ways, using the same gestures, wearing similar fashion, or speaking in coded language. This influence shaped the street culture around Ibadan for years. Inside the University of Ibadan, the confraternity's focus on discipline also prevented unnecessary clashes. They only reacted when provoked or threatened. By keeping their activities low-key, they avoided the chaos that often drew police or school attention to other groups. Their ability to adapt to changing situations made them stronger with time. Their story became an example of how control could be maintained, not through violence, but through careful management. By staying united, silent, and disciplined, the Airlords Confraternity continued to dominate the University of Ibadan and spread their network across the western states. A power built not on noise, but on strategy.
One of the most interesting parts of the Airlords Confraternity's rise in Ibadan was how they managed to bridge two very different worlds, the world of learned university students and the world of unlearned street boys. Many other confraternities failed because they couldn't maintain this balance. The Airlords, however, found a way to unite both sides under a shared code of loyalty and structure. Inside the University of Ibadan, most members were students. They were careful, enlightened, and strategic. They understood that their strength depended on staying invisible to school authorities. These student members were the planners. They organized information, communication, and coordination. They represented the intellect and discipline of the group. Outside the campus, in the city streets of Ibadan, were the boys who had little or no education. These were the ones known for their boldness, energy, and connection to everyday life in areas like Mokola and Sango. Though many of them didn't attend the university, they respected the Airlords Code. They became the physical arm of the confraternity, always ready to protect, inform, or assist when necessary. The Airlords were smart enough to ensure that both groups understood their roles. The enlightened members provided direction and leadership, while the street members provided strength and loyalty. This relationship was not built on fear, but on mutual respect. The street members admired the intelligence of the campus members, and the campus members valued the courage and awareness of the streets. This mix made the Airlords difficult to defeat. Other confraternities, like the Black Axe or Buccaneers, often had influence in either the campus or the streets, but rarely both. The Airlords ruled both spaces effectively. When tension rose between groups, they already had people on both sides who could gather information and control the situation before it got out of hand. Their ability to balance these two worlds also gave them economic power. The Airlords had something that no other confraternity could replicate: unity between intellect and muscle, between education and street sense. It was this balance that made their presence long-lasting. They had become more than a student group. They had evolved into a social system. The Airlords' presence could be felt in lectures, meetings, markets, and even the smallest street gatherings. Their strength was no longer about numbers. It was about control, trust, and how well they understood the environment around them. The Airlords' journey at the University of Ibadan evolved from secret brotherhood roots into a movement that shaped the city's underground social order. Recently, they were no longer seen as just one of the campus confraternities. They had become a powerful network that extended its reach across Ibadan and beyond. What distinguished them was not just strength, but the precision of their organization and the loyalty of their members. In Ibadan, influence had always been divided among different forces: politics, business, and local tradition. The Airlords' symbolic power in Ibadan grew partly because they maintained deep respect for Yoruba tradition. They participated quietly in community development and were known to support local festivals and youth events.
In return, they earned silent approval from elders and local authorities. Their motto emphasized respect, wisdom, and endurance, values that elevated their reputation beyond the stereotype of violence associated with cult groups. At the University of Ibadan, their dominance was visible in subtle ways. Elections within student bodies, hostile hierarchies, and even social events often bore the invisible mark of the Airlords' influence. They rarely appeared publicly, but their presence was always felt. Rival confraternities, especially the Black Axe, who often engaged in open conflicts, tried to counter this control, but the Airlords' level of coordination made it nearly impossible to overthrow their dominance completely. As time passed, Ibadan's streets became symbols of their silent rule. By the time other confraternities struggled with disunity and exposure, the Airlords had perfected the art of quiet influence. Their legacy wasn't just in numbers or battles won, it was in their endurance, the ability to evolve, survive, and still lead without needing to shout their presence. Their story became a mirror of Ibadan's strength, old, strategic, and always surviving. This content is for educational purposes only. We don't support cultism or violence.